We're kind of using the P&L as a method of validation on what we're seeing in the platforms, or a counterfactual for if the platforms are wrong. We might look at the platforms and things went bad, ROAS went down, everything went negative, but we look at the P&L and everything improved. And we go, well, maybe they did some other stuff. Maybe there was an activation, maybe there was a product launch. No, nothing happened. It was identical month to month. Okay, so now we know that when we put creative volume up in the account, ROAS actually goes down a little bit, but the P&L improves. And then you can start to build theories behind why that's the case, which is that, well, we've reached colder audiences, which built more top of funnel. And then those people end up converting on Google 3 days later. And so overall, that was a net positive effect. But when we're looking in isolation, trying to pick together attribution, it makes no sense. And so it allows you to make higher quality decisions that are aligned with the only thing that a business owner really cares about at all, which is how much profit comes out of the business at the end of the month.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? So I have Nathan here on the channel, and if you don't know Nathan, you should definitely check out Blue Sense Digital on YouTube because they talk a lot about P&Ls and understanding the finance of your business and tying that to marketing. So I know that, and we were just talking about this a moment ago, where people are starting to use P&L as like a buzzword, trying to say, oh yeah, we'll like increase your overall P&Ls, but then they don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing in the first place. You'll get, people that will say, I'll look at P&Ls and still looking at ROAS. And so they don't really have the relationship fully built back and forth. And so I'm curious to hear more about, how you find those, and as well as just a welcome back to the channel again, because it has been quite a while since we've had you back. So really excited to hear kind of what you guys are doing over there at Blue Sense Digital now.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Caden. We were just talking about before how in Australia, maybe not the US yet, but in Australia, everyone's now running with the messaging of that we tie performance marketing into P&L, or that we're P&L driven, etc. But that I feel like most of these agencies don't do that at all, and they don't really have any idea how to connect the P&L to actual paid media execution. And so this would be a really good video for being able to identify, is it just marketing on the front end of an agency? Are they just saying that they relate to the P&L, or they drive financial outcomes when they really don't know the core levers that they should be looking at and how these two connect? And we can also dive into a few things like, how do you make sense of ROAS when you're also looking at MER? When does MER start to fall apart? Are there some other secondary metrics that you should look at, etc.? So where should we start? I think the best place to start is, how do you relate ROAS to an MER number? This is something that we do in all of our audits, because I think it's a really good educational piece in an audit to be able to present a solution to attribution, because ultimately that's the thing that everyone's searching for. They're going like, what should we trust? Triple Whale's getting sold to them. Other third-party platforms are getting sold to them. Elevar, offline server tracking. You've got people saying just use 7-day click, don't use 1-day view. Then you got people, now you got incremental attribution. There's just so many different directions to go in. So the really easy, hey, let's keep it simple solution that I like to provide people out of the gates in the audit is, let's look at your MER or your AMER. If you're a bigger business that has a lot of returning customer revenue, for those that don't know what that is, AMER is new customer revenue divided by ad spend rather than total revenue. And let's look at that figure. Maybe last 30 days, you're at a 3. And let's make sure that the platforms also say 3. And if we go into Facebook and we look at your total ROAS and it says 9, it's wrong. It's over attributing massively, assuming that your primary drivers of acquisition within your business is Facebook and Google. And so what can we do from there? Well, we can go to an attribution setting breakdown, and then we can start looking at, well, what attribution setting correlates to the 3? And you might go down to 7-day click and go, what's the 7-day click ROAS? Oh, it's a 3. Okay, so now we have some congruency here. When we look at Meta, we see a 3. When we look at our P&L, we see a 3. Fantastic. Now we can actually trust Meta more as a platform because we dialed in the attribution setting that we want to use that correlates to the P&L outcome. On Google, it's a little bit tougher. We just put out a video on the Blue Sense channel with Caden about this in terms of cold versus warm tactics on Google. Because on Google, it's not as simple as, hey, you can just do an attribution setting change and you get clarity. It becomes a little bit more important in terms of how you structure the account. You need to go a little bit more into campaign by campaign to get more confidence that the numbers are actually linking up, but you can achieve the same thing. So the first thing that you really want to be striving for is that when we look at our P&L and we see the MER or the AMER number, does it make sense when correlated to ROAS? And if it doesn't, we need to fundamentally fix our attribution setting our audience exclusions, or the way that the account's being structured.
Gotcha. So when it comes to, so the way that I view from what you're saying is that your first objective is to cut off as much misattribution as possible. And that gets you closer to the benchmark that you're setting for that account on Meta and for that account on Google. Is that kind of a correct assumption for that?
Yeah, correct.
Gotcha. So, I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, that is attribution. Like, if you find that you're profitable at a 0.x ROAS on Meta, keep it at a 0.4x ROAS. And I think that makes a lot of sense, though, from a correlation standpoint, that you sort of first prove that it's wrong, cut off all that noise, and then bring it down to, okay, let's start here. We might be off the target a little bit, but we're way, way closer than where we're over here.
Yeah, 100%. Then kind of like moving into vetting someone's ability to use the P&L to make decisions. And like, why is there even this value proposition of, hey, we use P&Ls to drive media buying decisions? Like, why are we even talking about that, and why are we even doing it? Well, the reason why we're doing it is because the platforms lie and make things up. And so if you can't actually connect the platform to the P&L, you end up in a situation where you're saying one thing in calls to a client or interactions with a client, and the client's saying completely other things in their bank account. And so having a disconnect there becomes really unproductive to being able to make like directional decisions together. So that's like the main reason why people want to speak in that language. But then how can you actually do it effectively? What you're trying to do when you're looking at a P&L, when you're making marketing decisions, is you're trying to validate that the marketing decisions were correct or not. You're trying to validate that, hey, when we went and increased creative volume in the account from 50 ads to 100 ads this month, okay, the platform looks better. ROAS went up a little bit. We were able to spend a little bit more. But can we actually go over to the P&L and see an improvement as well? Did revenue actually go up in the store? I know revenue went up in the platform, but there's a lot of reasons as to why that could happen. Over attribution might have increased a bit because we've reached some more warmer audiences, etc. So let's actually validate it. And then the same thing for an efficiency improvement. Efficiency improved in the platform. Did it improve in the P&L? So we're kind of using the P&L as a method of validation on what we're seeing in the platforms, or a counterfactual for if the platforms are wrong. We might look at the platforms and things went bad, ROAS went down, everything went negative. But we look at the P&L and everything improved. And we go, well, maybe they did some other stuff. Maybe there was an activation. Maybe there was a product launch. No, nothing happened. It was identical month to month. Okay. So now we know that when we put creative volume up in the account, ROAS actually goes down a little bit, but the P&L improves. And then you can start to build theories behind why that's the case, which is that, well, we've reached colder audiences, which built more top of funnel. And then those people end up converting on Google 3 days later. And so overall, that was a net positive effect. But when we're looking in isolation, trying to pick together attribution, it makes no sense. And so it allows you to make higher quality decisions that are aligned with the only thing that a business owner really cares about at all, which is how much profit comes out of the business at the end of the month. What you want to be like looking for in an agency is that ability to do that validation process. And so when a decision has been made within the account and is being communicated to you, hey, we've done this, this was the result. Yes, there should always be some references to in-platform metrics. I'm not saying, because the extreme of this, which people have interpreted before, is just don't even open the platform, which I think is ridiculous. Like, still look at your click-through rates, still look at what your CPCs are. These are all like great diagnostic tools to give you an indication of what's working and what's not. But once you've done all that and you've been reported to, okay, CTRs were good when we did this, this was good, all positive signals. And then what you want to hear at the end of that sentence is, and when we look at total profit contribution for the month, or when we look at AMER, or when we look at total net sales in Shopify, it also improved, which validates everything that we saw in platform, or it doesn't validate, and we have a theory as to why. So that's what I would always be looking at with really any agency you're working with. Like, if your agency's not doing that, get a better agency.
Honestly.
But it's also for like, if an agency is really pushing that we do connect to P&L, it's a really good front and marketing play. I think Caden was saying before, not many people are doing it in the US at the moment. I think it'll become massive because it's the push that's in Australia at the moment. Every big agency is just changing their front end ad messaging to, we look at MER and we drive for profit contribution and we connect to the P&L. But then I almost guarantee you we could serve up a quiz to half the performance marketers at those agencies and they would fail the quiz. And so you want to make sure that whatever is being sold to you is actually getting delivered within.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's an easy thing to check too, because you just look at your P&L. Really, that's all you need to do as a business owner is watch that. And obviously, what you're paying for when it comes to these, other agencies that are looking at P&L is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it just seems like we're the tool for attribution instead of an algorithm when it comes to that. It's like, okay, we're figuring out the funnel, we're figuring out what contribution margin is happening within this campaign. And then we're looking at, okay, what's the theories behind that? So the more experience you have, the more theories you have that are accurate, that will then lead into positive results faster for the business versus having to go through all these different test phases. So
Yeah.
I think speed also makes a lot of sense versus just cycling through a bunch of different tests. So that makes a lot of sense though. That's funny that like everyone started to copy the P&L side of the equation. So yeah, hey, it's working. It's good to hear.
I know. Yeah. I'll do a big U-turn on everything as well, because I don't think you'll expect this perspective, which is that I think the P&L messaging will end up hurting a lot of these agencies. And the reason being is that I actually think if you're not positioned correctly, it hurts the client too. Because if we are using the P&L as a point of validation, what ends up occurring is that accountability of the P&L shifts to the agency or the freelancer or the contractor, which I think is a bad idea. And the reason why I think it's a bad idea is I don't genuinely believe that a marketing agency drives the growth in a business. I think that they are an improvement in the efficiency for you to be able to distribute media and get a return. But I do not think that it is a marketing agency's responsibility to take your business from being a $6 million business to being an $18 million business. It's a ridiculous expectation, because if that was true, that would be an absolute money hack. And all you would have to do is scale to being a $7 million business. You can immediately print to 18 mil. You can exit on a 25% EBITDA and make like 40 million and retire forever. Like, it would be the easiest arbitrage that exists. And it's because it's not real. The idea of being with a marketing agency rather than being in-house, or being with a really good marketing agency where you might be paying a premium versus a mediocre one, is not that they're going to grow your business and 3x it, but instead the media spend that you are going to allocate regardless is going to be allocated more efficiently, which is going to give you a 10 to 20% delta, either on top line revenue or on your growth rate. And so you were going to grow at 30%, but now with a better partner, you're growing at 35 or 40%. And so they're going to effectively like add fire. They're going to add fuel to the fire. They're not going to be the logs that build the business. And so particularly with low 7-figure brands, and I'll be keen to get your thoughts on this after I stop. Particularly with low 7-figure brands, if you come in with hard P&L messaging, hey, we will optimize around the P&L, we will improve your profit contribution, I think it's a terrible frame, because it sets the expectation that, hey, you as the business owner, you have no responsibility at all about growing this business anymore. We are going to do it for you. In reality, we don't control the core fundamental levers that grow a direct consumer or a retail business, which is product and brand. At the end of the day, that is what creates an 8 and 9-figure business compared to a 7-figure business. And it's completely out of control. And you could think about those two components as like the logs in the fire. And then the marketing comes in as the fuel on the fire that accelerates the growth rate.
I love that metaphor. That's a great metaphor. I think, well, and that's one of the biggest issues I see clients running into where we've worked with, and it turns into one of these things where they're always trying to hack the algorithm and trying to like add this level of complexity onto what they're already doing versus just changing the packaging or making, their overall cogs be a bit better. Like, there's these other areas that you have way more impact on to drop your overall, or increase your overall profitability, to then allow the traffic to then scale even further. And so I think I completely agree. I've seen that issue pop up so many times with like 6, 7, even 8-figure brands that have a product market fit, but then they stop focusing on the product and the service and focus on hacking the algorithm. And I think that's, I totally agree. I think that's a big fault, because like you're saying, as you scale, things change, profitability changes. You have bad reviews that maybe start to flow in. If you have a product flaw, got to deal with that versus changing your overall targeting. I think that's a really, really, really good assumption on the impact of, marketing through traffic. It's only really going to change it about 10% when it comes to the actual impact of it. So, and that's also why, you as well, we want to work with brands that have already established their footprint, because now you're available to actually scale and throw gas. You have a fire to throw gasoline on, kind of thing, versus just starting out really small and then wondering like, why aren't I getting results? Google ads or meta ads doesn't work. So I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into as well.
Yeah. In Australia at the moment, this will reach you pretty soon, I imagine, which is that about 30% of the market now isn't with agencies. They're with coaching groups. Coaching groups are massive in Australia. And I think that coaching groups actually serve a really good purpose at like the low 7-figure to maybe high 6-figure range, which is that a bad agency at that revenue level will do way more damage to you than no agency at all. And because most agencies aren't good, particularly agencies that serve that low of the market, you could generally think like the lower in the market you serve, generally the worse the agency is, just because you can't charge as much and therefore the quality of the work's going to be worse. And so what ends up happening is that like if you're a business doing $1 million a year, most agencies will do way more damage than good for you. If you go out, you also have no idea how to vet you that what you're looking for. And your expectations are probably ridiculous as well because they've been sold to you as a dream. And so these coaching groups fit in very well in that area of the market because they teach you how to do it yourself. And then you get to learn the ins and outs of basic fundamentals of Meta and Google ads, which allows you to get to $1.5 or $2 million when you can then outsource. And you can effectively vet when you do outsource to an agency because you know the fundamentals. So you know if someone's just, if it's a salesperson talking absolute garbage to you, then they have no idea what they're talking about. You can at least make your way through that. But there was a point I had here, which was going to tie back to the P&L, which was, but then once you bridge past there, once you're at like a $4 or $5 million business, as we were just saying, the highest leverage point as the founder, I still don't believe is running the ad account. Now, do I think it's not valuable? No, I think it's like incredibly valuable because if it can take you from a 30% growth rate to a 35 or a 40%, you compound that over 3 years, it's massive. And that's why the marketing agency land is so big. But at the end of the day, I think the founder working on product, brand, site activations, and other efforts to increase the growth of the business moves it from 30% growth to 70% growth. I think there's way larger arbitrage opportunities there. And so I think that's where your focus should move to as you progress through these stages of business.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good wrap up point because I mean, it kind of applies to most businesses too. Like even for like marketing agencies, like you're doing a lot yourself to maintain profitability. You know enough about it to then hand the keys to someone else to vet that person, make sure that person can actually drive the car, not going to crash it. And you can constantly vet that person based on the P&L versus just getting into the name of the game of, attribution, trying to figure out what causes this and that, looking at why ROAS dropped over here versus, like you said, focusing on something that's more geared towards the growth of the actual business. So it's, like I said, it's the same thing I feel like for every business now that I'm thinking about it. Like I'm doing that, you're doing that. Like it's just the name of the game when it comes to this stuff. You just have to apply it to yourself if you don't know, especially if you're early on. So yeah, I guess any final closing words that you want to have, words of wisdom when it comes to P&L and maybe third-party tools or anything of that nature?
Yeah. Third-party tools, I think, add more confusion than help. If we're talking about like third-party attribution, if it's third-party like P&L aggregators, I think that's very helpful. And then the top 3 best metrics to measure on the P&L to vet your agency if they're reporting to you on it is MER-AMER. If you're an 8-figure brand, you should probably be looking at AMER. Number 2 is profit contribution, specifically profit contribution 3 or contribution margin 3, which is gross profit minus ad spend. And then the last metric that should be reported onto
NCAC. I guess NVER or AMER is kind of like that, but
let's throw NCAC in. I think that's better. I think looking at NCAC and AMER both have good advantages. I won't dive into why.
It's a whole nother video.
We could talk for another 10 minutes. But yeah, you should be getting reported to on both of those.
Awesome. Makes sense. I think everyone can track that kind of stuff. And, there's P&Ls that you can find online. We'll put a example of one as well in the description of this video, just a really basic one that you can look at as well. So that'll be kind of a good starting point. From there too, you can vet your own business. So it's not just something for vetting. If you have an agency, do it now because you want to make sure that you can even work from that in the first place. And the more data that you have, the better. Because now you can look at past data last year, look for seasonality. There's so many other things that you can see just by tracking that information over the year. So Thanks for coming on, Nathan. Appreciate you for sharing some more insight, and hopefully we'll have you back, but we'll have a link to your channel as well in the description. So if you want to nerd out on P&L, finance, and how it kind of ties into marketing, check it out. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for having me, Caden.